All right. I heard I had some bad news this morning that the historian David Irving is apparently in very bad health and is near death and is basically requiring round-the-clock care. This is coming from an account affiliated with the website that used to be the focal point. It's Irving Books, but apparently Irving doesn't have much time left. Okay, and I was planning to make a different video today, but somewhat related. I was going to cover this book and why I think this book is legit and actually a lot of fun to read. And I was planning to segue into Irving, who endorses this book, and also Hugh Trevor Roper himself. But this will be another time, just because I heard about this and I was gonna record anyway, so I figured I would just do we could just talk David Irving. But I'll say that Irving, I've known him for a while. I've met him a few times. I've corresponded over the years, and I kind of seen this coming because correspondence has dropped off actually a while ago, and I've last emailed him some time ago. I wasn't offended to not get a reply, but I figured, who knows how busy he is, and he's probably late in life. And I'd just been talking to a friend of mine, because we were kind of speculating on Churchill's War Volume 3 and True Himmler 2, and whether or not that would happen. And it looks like that won't be happening, which I kind of figured, just because the last time I met Irving, he was in the process of writing the Himmler bio, and he was speaking on that actually, and that was in like 2010, and then the book came out 10 years later, and I mean I don't know, but I figured I'd talk about Irving. He was a very colorful character, and he's maybe different than what you might think, or maybe not. But I'll say this: when I first met him because he was doing like a speaking tour, and he was going to Los Angeles. So I thought this would be interesting. This is a long time ago, and so I drove to LA. I met with some friends, and then I went to go see Irving speak. I didn't know exactly how that would go, but it turned out it was interesting, because at the time, he had plenty of opposition already, and he was already running around getting chased by Antifas, and so this is before most people had heard of Antifa. This is like before before Trump. Most people were unfamiliar with this sort of thing, but these people had been harassing and kind of he knew how to he knew kind of the whole drill. So to go see him, he wouldn't give the location at first, and then he would drop it on you later, and you would you'd like reserve it, and then he would just to kind of not to give away the whole thing, but he emailed with like if you have any trouble with finding the venue or anything, give this number a call. And so I remember I did have trouble, and so I'm like, all right, call that number. And I figured it might be someone like an assistant or something, and so I call it, and it's David Irving himself, and he he was pretty boots on the ground. He was, and he's very accessible. And I'll say that this wasn't like, I'm not going to do a full-throated endorsement of David Irving, but I do think he did a lot of valuable work, and I think he was a good guy in the end, if not perfect. And he I don't know. I would say he was accessible. He's the only historian who I knew, just because he'd gotten himself in so much trouble. He that was the predicament. But anyhow, it was very interesting, and so he gave a talk at this hotel conference, and it was about the first time. It was about like he was going over all the decrypts from like the Enigma type stuff, like all these German messages that Britain had, and he was kind of going over how some of this related to the Holocaust, and is very interesting because what he was bringing stuff up, and some of it he would show like they had like Einsatzgruppen units were they picked up messages where they're requesting more like finished Tommy guns in like Riga and things like that, and to conduct it. And so he's piecing together some of the stuff, but also he was connecting a lot of the stuff with the bombings of Germany, and about how, say, however many messages there were, and that that were intercepted, and it was basically telling troops and frontline troops in the east that basically their families had been killed by Allied air, like these huge bombing raids, which is something of a major topic for Irving, and probably his best book is the Dresden book. But this is but it was interesting because he's showing how, like, he's saying, how what would this is what is causing this conflict to get so extreme and to reach this pitch where people are comfortable committing atrocities one against the other, and that's how war goes. And he would bring up also things like Iraq and Haditha and things, which I related to, and just by going over the nature of the conflict, and it was really interesting stuff. There would be a whole lot of strange characters at the Irving events and things like that. There would be skinheads and things who he Irving didn't seem entirely comfortable with this sort of thing, because he was very like kind of like Tory-ish, and just kind of he thought of himself as like a British, like this high, like a high class British, like a real Englishman. and not necessarily some, like maybe a racist Englishman, but I think probably, maybe mildly anti-Semitic, or he certainly had feelings against some of these people. But I don't think he was necessarily like an actual like fascist or something, or like a national socialist, but I would say he was definitely like a Hitler admirer, and which I think I'll just say his downfall was kind of the Lippstadt trial, and Deborah Lippstadt, he takes to court over basically she says he's a Hitler admirer and things, and this is a libel, and he takes her to court and loses. Is a very it's a very silly thing that he did, and he would go on about that a lot, and anytime you would meet with Irving, or he would go over all the details of this trial and things like that, which is interesting. But he certainly fell into a trap with it. I mean, maybe of his own design, and maybe this is just hubristic. I don't mean to just rip on him. Like I said, I liked him, and it was kind of cool because you would meet him, and you could go to his things, and there would just be. I remember in Nevada there was a woman, memorably. Me and my friend went to this thing, and I remember he was doing this just kind of he was just kind of kicking it with everybody, and people could ask him questions, and this woman started going off about like how Hitler was like such a kind person, and he was like the kindest being, that like to the extent that he would go in the forest, and animals would come, and he would just feed them from his hands, and then he was just like, well, kind of politely ripping on this woman. It was just really amusing stuff, and I don't know, but I'll get into maybe some of his books. Starting with, I've got a whole stack here we can go over. All right, so we'll just talk a few of these books. These are pretty much all of the books. I've read most of his books, but these are all the ones that I still have. So I was just looking around for like Trail of the Fox and Rise and Fall of the Luftwaffe, and I don't have many more, but books come and go. But these are the ones that I still have. So I'll just go over some of them. Maybe starting with the newest one, True Himmler. True Himmler. All right. So True Himmler is based on Himmler's real diaries and letters. It says, "In life, one must always be decent and brave and kind." It is a very strange cover right off the bat for True Himmler, with this very strange quote by Himmler that he would put on the cover, and you see, and Hitler is actually in the more prominent, with just a little Himmler kind of poking out. It's a very strange cover. Most of these books are, and then again in the inside, these books are I mean, this all the focal point books that he would do are they're just really nice books. I'll just say that this one was very much anticipated. Like I said, this would be the one who. This is the last one that really came out, like, in the time that I actually was familiar with him. Because most of the stuff was maybe before my time, and you're just reading older stuff. But like I say, I'd spoke to him before this came out. I remember talking to him about a lot of the stuff in person, and he'd be cool to talk to in person, like, because he knew the ins and outs of all this kind of stuff, and maybe he had some obviously I mean he had some mastery over this material, and no one can really deny this. But you could just talk to him about weird stuff. Maybe you're curious. Like I talked about, like, Karl Wolf and things like that are maybe, you try to come up with things that are, like a historian could maybe shed some light on if you talk to him in person, or just kind of kick it back and forth. But he went off quite a bit about this book, and I thought it was it's kind of a strange book, and it kind of caught me off guard in what everything he was doing with it, because I always thought, like, a big thing, and I've talked about this before with Hitler's War, I think, but one of the big Irving, the things he's trying to stress in that, I'll say that, like, when I mentioned how I saw him talking, he was going over the decrypts and things like that, and at the time, it wasn't any kind of really Holocaust denial. He was just saying, like, maybe this is more tit for tat than is thought, and that you're gonna get people doing more extreme things when you you start bombing civilian cities. Then these Germans have all these Jews they've already rounded up, ghettoized, put into concentration camps, and he's just basically saying you're setting the stage for the worst type stuff to happen. It's just gonna happen, and this is more or less how soldiers are. And I agree with that kind of thing, and I've always thought that you see people really clean up the work of troops, and just what, like, young infantrymen do in the field and things like that, which can get wilder than maybe what people are comfortable with. But Irving, I think, had a firmer grasp on this than most people, and it just made sense to me that you would, like, the way he described the brutality of this, and he talked about, like, he said, like, he definitely he thought Auschwitz was overblown, for reasons that, he says this is close to airport, this is a satisfying a tourist experience, this is somewhere where you could take students, this is somewhere, and he's saying that they've reconstructed this, they've made replicas of things which you can't fully trust, maybe. And so he's saying this isn't so much the thing, and this gets him in enough trouble, but he was saying that basically he believed that there were certainly mass killings of Jews, and but that the bulk of this was with the action Reinhard camps, like Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, and Lublin, Majdanek. And these he thought were genuine killing centers, and but his thing isn't so much that this didn't happen. He's saying that Hitler didn't direct it. This is Irving's view. I don't agree with this. I think I would say, well, I'll just say his whole, and he's saying that SS guys, maybe mid-level SS guys, were responsible. They're carrying this out. They're overly zealous about this stuff, and Hitler had prevented that. He would bring up a lot of stuff, and like he would say like Hitler forbid, say, before World War II, he'd say he didn't want people to say make Jewish people wear yellow stars and things like that, and identifying badges, and so he forbid that. Later, Reinhard Heydrich saw that maybe this only applies in the Reich itself. Once they took over Poland, in Heydrich's view, this opened up. They could do this stuff in Poland, and that opened the door for all this other kind of activity, which then spread and went back. This isn't just David Irving who says this. I mean, Raul Hilberg says this, and this is also mainstream Holocaust history. The Jewish Holocaust historians, maybe the official historian, will say the same stuff actually, and I like it. It can kind of go. You could see where you can take different opinions on this or different interpretations, but also where this could get distorted. But I just don't necessarily. But I mean, this is what he's arguing, that Hitler had nothing to do with it. I think Irving, he was a great admirer of Hitler, and he maybe reflexively would defend his actions. And I think he looked at him in some ways as, he's someone who his country had entered war with, but he wished that it hadn't, and that was his, what he would say quite a bit. That he would say the Jewish people should listen to him. This could, keep these things from happening again. But he would try to absolve Hitler from being personally responsible for whatever reason. I kind of don't really. He'll say maybe. Some people think that maybe Irving was just autistically, like, he's just a historian who wants to see the primary source. And so there's no, like, Führer directive written down where Hitler says kill all the Jews. So, therefore, this order didn't happen. But this is just what Irving says. I don't want to just go into all my view of it, which is different. I'll say it just is. I'm familiar with every other view, and people might disagree with me or so on the stuff, because I would say I don't consider Irving a Holocaust denier. I'm not myself. He certainly is a revisionist in different ways, and so he's revisionist in ways that I think are good and bad. But I was kind of confused by this book, True Himmler, because it seemed like maybe Irving is putting it on the SS then, that he absolves Hitler of this stuff, but maybe the SS is doing it. Because you've maybe heard other people say this stuff, that Hitler had his whole thing, but the SS and these like death head units and stuff for the real bad guys, as if he didn't like raise these units in the first place. But I don't know. I kind of figured that might be where he's going. But this book is somewhat hagiographic of Himmler himself. Himmler comes off saintly in contrast to Hitler. Maybe Himmler is portrayed is really this person who is a devout Catholic who put the same kind of devotion into the state for Germany and his role and all the stuff, but is basically a noble character, and he gets into the dirty business of policing and all this stuff, and whatever comes with that. Some of the stuff it does show, because it covers all the stuff before World War II and the different kind of schemes between Nazis and so forth. It's not completely like it's not. I wouldn't say it's a warts and all type thing, but it's not. Maybe it's hyperbolic to say it's Himmler hagiography, but I'll say this doesn't really even get into World War II, and there's some confusing things about this book, and it seems very unfinished. And in the past, I've thought to maybe go over this book, and after I'd read it, I thought about reviewing it or so on, but I'd have to actually give it a bad review. And even though it's interesting and what it goes over, it is illuminating in some ways. It was a disappointment as a book, and I think you can kind of see the I kind of like the weirdness of some of it. Even the title I think is funny. But the book basically ends with World War II, so it doesn't get into it. It only goes over the peacetime Himmler and the bulk of his life. But it stops at World War II, and you figure there must be a volume 2 in the works, and it kind of hints at that. But then it also, in some ways, it doesn't. In some ways, it seems like this is a standalone work, and there's other things to it. Say that the print in this book, if you look at it, you probably can't get a really good idea of it from there, but it's actually much larger than most of Irving's books. Say like Hitler's War is very small, and the pages are very thin, whereas these are you could see straight through them. These pages are very thick. The print is very large. It's easy to read. For instance, this looks like a huge book, but it's a 500-page book, and it goes quick. You actually read it very quick. It's very disappointing because you get to World War II and it doesn't happen, and it kind of the storyline, just because of the necessity of it, does propel you forward at times, but it doesn't really go over it, and it just seems like an unfinished work. It seems like there should be a volume 2, but you get just from the overall presentation of it, you get the idea that it's not really going to happen. That this isn't just volume 1. It doesn't call itself that, and only say near the end, it seems as if it's going to get into it, but it also just kind of in a way, it just kind of seems like it leaves it to you as to what happens next. So this isn't, anyone could read this book. There's nothing really, I don't know. There are some weird things in it. I would say that this book, I'll say, for instance, most of Irving's career, I think he didn't necessarily want to present himself as like totally pro-Nazi, but maybe this is not necessarily a saintly portrayal, but it's definitely kind of pro, even the fact that I mean, this is true Himmler, and it kind of gives you, this quote is very strange, and there's other kind of strange things in, like it delves hard into say Jewish involvement in the killings of the Romanov family in Russia and things like that, and which maybe tie into his view of the Holocaust, but it's kind of, and all there's other things too. There's a few tropes that I think are kind of tired that Irving goes over, like the Judea declares war on Germany, and you can only go over that so much, but he he goes into that a lot. The other thing about this book, maybe, it's interesting, but maybe odd or not, is that he argues kind of forcefully that Himmler did not commit suicide. He said this in the past too, but this book brings it up that it was like a British Army sergeant who took it upon himself to, after Himmler's capture, to just beat Himmler to death, and that's how he died. He was beaten to death by a British Army sergeant, and so this is he argues for this, and maybe this is true or not. I find it hard to say, but he argues for it. But at the same time, like, he kind of presents it like I don't know, like, you should care, but most people aren't going to think it's really that big of a deal if Heinrich Himmler was murdered, because, I mean, I don't know, but maybe that is just the facts. So just for what it's worth, I think that's the kind of stuff that's in the book. But yeah, like I say, it only goes over it's a strange book, and the way he kind of talks in it is different in a way. Maybe I don't know. It's different than other Irving books, and maybe it'll make more sense in the future. So, but it looks like we won't see a Himmler 2, a true Himmler 2, which I think is unfortunate, because maybe this book, an Irving Himmler bio, probably could have been the definitive book. Irving is for sure. I mean, it's been admitted by however many people, even who hate Irving, even other, as much as he'll rip on the conformist historians, the mainstream a lot of those people do have a lot of respect for Irving and see value in him and the things and the kind of insights that he's brought up with the Axis side of the war. Maybe it's because he's more sympathetic to it that he goes over it more. He leans heavy into it. You maybe just consider that this is somebody who is sympathetic to that side when you read the stuff. But I mean, you're reading something a little different. It can't hurt that much. And very few people will say that there's no value in his work. Maybe Richard Evans will say that, but I don't consider Richard Evans a first-rate historian at all for World War II. And I think he goes way too far to the, he has a very leftist view of the stuff, and maybe it's just too far. But you don't necessarily get, like, I don't know, people are going over the source material and they put their view on it, what they think of it, and then as a reader you can kind of figure where the facts really are. What should we go over next? All right, that was True Himmler. So maybe we'll go over this guy. maybe, 'cause I kind of, have to rip on that book a little bit, True Himmler. I'm not saying it is totally bad, or if you went and bought it, but I'll say if you're watching this video and you're figuring, oh, how can I support David Irving? I'm curious to read his books, maybe whatever. I would say maybe get a different book from Irving than True Himmler, and True Himmler is maybe not the best starting place, and maybe would leave you dissatisfied and confused. But if you're a Irving completist, you've got to read it. But and just in terms of like a new David Irving book, it's kind of worth checking out. It came out a few years ago, but it's still pretty new. It has always been kind of low key. It didn't get very much hype or press or anything. But I know quite a few people have read it. I've talked to some people who read it. Most people who I've talked to liked the book. But I kind of think that if you read David Irving's books, you're probably not that casual about it. I just read all this stuff, so I'm not too I'll just say, if it's a bad book, it's not his best at all. It's a very weird book. I'm not going to recommend you getting it. It's expensive as well. Some people might think it's cool. The people who I talk to, friends and things, who've said that they liked it, I usually bring up my points and why I don't like it, and most people agree that they find a lot to be disappointed with the book. But nevertheless, most people like it. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you'll think I'm stupid about the whole whatever. All right, we'll go into this one. This is kind of there's been kind of different iterations of this book. This is, like, as far as I know, the last. This is the focal point edition. Apocalypse 1945, The Destruction of Dresden. This is the horrifying original account of the most devastating air attack in history. The book which first told the world what happened to one German city in 1945. All right. This book, I'll kind of just give something of a full-throated endorsement to. I think it's great. And this is what put him on the map and what made him a huge success. And people were just interested in this book. It is an interesting book. This book is, oddly enough, takes a very it's very sympathetic to the British Bomber Command, to the Royal Air Force, to all the Brits who did these bombing missions, and in particular, Sir Arthur Harris, Bomber Harris, who Irving had met personally, who also liked the book, and seemed to like Irving. It's interesting too. I'll say, when like I said, I've met Irving a few times, so I've shook his hand a few times, and there's however many of these generals on every side of the war that shook hands with Irving, as he met all these guys. Irving met, Harris. Irving met a lot of Hitler's top guys and people who'd shook hands with Hitler. And it's just kind of interesting. It puts you a few hands away from, Hitler. But so it's just interesting to meet Irving, because it just brings, you're like, whoa, this stuff, this didn't really happen that long ago. Like, you're not that disconnected to some of these events as maybe you feel. Like when you're born however long after, and if you're not that familiar with history, it can kind of all you don't know necessarily you don't necessarily have the right perspective, I mean, who can put all that in perspective, but you know what I'm saying. But this book, I thought some of the most interesting stuff in it is how they came up with this stuff. And Irving shows how there was nothing really accidental about these bomber raids, these huge, right? And like they would create these firestorms very purposefully, and maybe weather conditions could send this just horrifyingly out of control, maybe beyond what they even intended or expected. But they probably, they seem to have been happy with the results. Certainly, Harris was following orders to. You can see the kind of other iterations of the book, but I mean, the way that they came up with the stuff and how they figured out how to do it was like a scientific process, and they settled on, a really intricate way of conducting these missions where they're using the window, like this foil, to confuse the radar, and they have different planes for like pathfinders and things that could drop different flares, and how the other aircraft could move on, how they're targeting the stuff, and basically how they have a mixture of different bombs. And the real idea is to spread out all kinds of little fires. And this is what they figured out. If you just spread out all these little fires and keep them going just across a wide area, this is going to create the firestorms. This is where you're going to get you're creating these conditions. So it is done purposefully, and he demonstrates how this is done purposefully. So they would use and they had to use kind of a mixture. So they had to also use maybe incendiary bombs to start all these little fires, but they also had to use like explosive, like blockbuster bombs and things that to put the building, put the buildings in the street, gut them out, rip you to make the kindling, just bust the stuff up, and then the incendiaries can go over, and then also things like delayed bombs that could kill first responders, or make it so people didn't want to go put these fires out. So there's however many the Germans have all these civil defense type forces to try to put these fires out, and but they need to keep these fires and keep them spread out so that they could create the firestorm, so that they would try to kill the first responders trying to put them out. And so they make this whole concoction, and a really complex thing, beyond, like, maybe more than what you're just thinking of, like the 1,000 bomber raid, where it's just like, you just sent like however many Lancasters and like B-17s or whatever, like you just figure all the these planes, and they just drop the bombs and they go. But it's more complex. And the scenes in the book that describe the starting with Hamburg and then on to Dresden, he goes over more than just Dresden itself, but also like how it came to that point. It goes over kind of the whole RAF bombing campaign, and it's just kind of vividly told story. I've also read other things about Bomber Command. I'm a huge fan of Max Hastings. But I'd say that, like, he wrote the book on Bomber Command, but I would say this book is a better read than that. It just tells you, it's just a very vivid kind of, it shows a lot about from the perspective of the Brits doing the stuff, conducting these raids, especially Harris, who Irving is very sympathetic to. You know, oddly enough, like he definitely you know, he's not saying that this is a bad guy or anything. This is someone who was doing, you know, he's following orders. He's doing what he thinks is gonna win the war. What's the best way to do it? But you know, obviously Irving isn't happy with it, and so on. But it's kind of it's a very interesting book. It's somewhat short, but yeah, I would recommend this book for sure. If you've never read this book, probably a lot of people have, but probably most people haven't. And it took me a while. This wasn't the first book of his that I read, and I kind of figured, like, why read that one? Because I already know what happens. The city is destroyed, and all these people are killed, or whatever. But then I read it in one sitting, and it was just or at least very close to one sitting. It was I plowed through this very quickly, you know, and it was just really interesting. So, recommended. What should we do next? We got True Himmler. We've got Apocalypse. We won't be doing some of the Trail of the Fox or whatever. It's fine. What else do we got? Maybe just knock this one out of the way. This one's interesting too. They're all interesting. The War Between the Generals by David Irving. This is a book that is all about the Allies, and you know, most of his books are maybe about the Axis. It's an Allied book. Obviously, he's trying to make these guys look like jerks. You know, they're all feuding amongst each other. Some of them have more like dilettante. Some of them are more you know, kind of running corrupt things or whatever. But they're all, you know, you get the idea from the title that he's presenting maybe a very warts and all description of these guys, but I like it, and I like that kind of stuff, you know, because otherwise you don't want to read a book on you know, like Eisenhower and you know, Omar Bradley that just makes them seem like the greatest, you know, real American Joes or whatever. You know, you want to read something a little more interesting, and so maybe a bit more scandalous. And Irving, I think this stuff is great. It's not particular, like it doesn't slam these guys. Like, I think they come across just colorful, and it kind of shows, I think, a lot about it's very insightful, because this is, as far as the U.S. and what we had with the Allies, it was kind of a tenuous alliance, and maybe that shouldn't be forgotten, and that it was a feat to manage you know, all these different personalities, all these different countries, and across a really broad front, and all the drama that is involved in that. You know, it didn't come easy. It wasn't just the good guys all band together to stop Hitler, but it's a more complex tale. And so I think Irving is trying to make, you know, he is trying to give an unflattering portrait, but that's the value of Irving. You know, maybe that's what you want to read. I wanted to read it. Not that I you know, I thought, not that I like, you know, think these are bad guys or anything. You just kind of, you'd like to read maybe a little more of edgier, kind of a more raw kind of take on the whole thing. Patton particularly comes off very colorful, and some of these some of them come off, you know, you're like, maybe what you think, just not very impressive characters, but just people who were there in their role and maybe cause more problems than you think or what. This is definitely a book that I think is it's really cool. There's nothing really controversial here. It's not like it says like Allies are the bad guys or the Holocaust isn't real or something. It just says it's just about how difficult it was and how difficult some of these personalities were. And if you're interested, you know you might think it's neat, especially if maybe you're just an Axis holic and you maybe like to check out the Allied guys a little bit, and this would be a good one to do. So this isn't a focal point book. This is an older book. This is This is one of the only older books I have by Irving at this point. Like I used to have more, but books come and go, and they disappear, and whatever. What should we go over next? Okay. We'll go over, okay. We'll just go over maybe Churchill's War. One, and this is a paperback version that I've had for like forever. And then this is like the signed focal point copy. Let's see. You can get these signed. And so this is definitely the more impressive edition that Irving did himself. But either way, there's a volume 1 by Focal Point too. It looks really good. And these are books that I'd recommend, but I think are kind of strange in a way too, because you're kind of spending a lot of time with someone who you really hate. And so if if you're interested in maybe you really hate Churchill and you want to see how bad of a guy he is or something, these books are kind of a slam. And like this book in particular, oddly enough, it presents itself kind of like both of them kind of do. They kind of, but this one in particular, it kind of acts like Irving kind of acts like he likes Churchill. like despite all this, he's like just a rascally character. And sure, he did all this, but you got to say he's a great guy in the end. But he did all, but he's building a very damning case, and to the point. I mean, I'd say maybe you might want to if you're gonna read these books like that, you probably want to read maybe another book by someone who is maybe pro Churchill or something, like Hastings' book Winston's War is maybe a more pro book that maybe can kind of give a different side of the story or so. But this is just how corrupt of a guy is, how he's alcoholic, and how he's controlled by all these interests who do not care about what happens to Britain or the British Empire, and are happy to just ruin everything and just for their own whatever. And Churchill is constantly showboating while he exposes the British people to all these hazards, and he acts like he is too, but he's not at all. And a good deal of this is likely the case. Is documented, pretty well, pretty interestingly, but I'd say it comes somewhat like, I don't know, when I read this stuff, I don't like, you're spending a lot of time with like, it's like someone you hate or someone who Irving hates, because it's just a constant slam. But maybe it's an interesting story. Um, it is an interesting story. I mean, I did like these books, but they're kind of strange. I think from Irving's point of view, they're kind of strange. But the other thing I'll say is that this book ends. It doesn't. These books don't really go over World War II. And there's a lot here. This is kind of a big story, but there should be a part 3. This is meant to be a trilogy, and I'll say, as long as I've no, I shouldn't say that, but I've heard from Irving. He said himself that he was very close to making Churchill's War Volume 3 is very close to being complete, and this was well over 10 years ago. So I don't know if there's material out, like if this stuff is around, but I mean, if if it'll ever see the light of day, because who knows what his unfinished work looks like, because it's not looking like Irving is going to be doing any more writing. And from the sound of it, he's very close to Death's Door, and however long that takes could be a while. But I mean, no details are given, but from the sound of it, it doesn't sound good. It seems like he has round the clock care in very bad shape, won't be writing anymore, and so on and so forth. So who knows what'll happen with Churchill's War Volume 3. Maybe this is very close to being done and it can just be released, or maybe that'll never happen. But it would be interesting. I like these books. I'll say this one more, even though it just kind of drops you in mid-war and goes over Churchill. It's kind of an interesting story, and you don't need to, I keep on saying that, but you don't really need to read the volume 1, especially if you're somewhat familiar anyway. It might be that some of this stuff, some of these mid-war machinations are more interesting, or are more, that just are more of what you'd like to hear about, or you're just more unfamiliar with. And it's just a lot of strange stuff and anecdotes, and most of it is accusatory, with Churchill killing his Polish allies and things like that. And otherwise, like, his family's being humiliated and all this other stuff is going on, and he's up to no good, and but still kind of pulling it off. What could be said of it all? But this one does really, kind of prep you for. I mean, I've had this book for a very long time, and it's talking about it brings up Volume 3, which I would like to read, and we'll see what happens with that. My guess is that maybe we will see some of that, just because it's been so long, and maybe he was just putting the finishing touches on this or whatever. Maybe a rougher. This is a very polished book. I'd say it's Irving in top form, and just as much, and like it really kind of complements. Churchill's war is very much kind of complementary towards Hitler's war, and if you liked Hitler's war, you might like this. It's just the opposite, except where Hitler's war is going over, he's going over how he thinks, he's saying that like Hitler's doing stuff, for all these people are against him, but he's basically he's laying out that Hitler's basically rationally acting and making good decisions and doing and just like kind of all that, and then this is kind of the opposite, and you just read about this guy who's just right at the center of history and just wrecking everything, and is basically evil kind of figure, like I don't know, but it's I mean, if you're at all interested in just Churchill, I think you can hit this up and just get a lot of facts out of it, and you get maybe you might think he lays on a little thick in how much he's kind of making a case against Churchill, but I think you'll still, regardless, you'll find that it's kind of a valuable, kind of a different book. Most books aren't going to slam Winston Churchill like this, and from this perspective. I mean, maybe someone would from like a leftist like a hardcore left-wing commie kind of perspective, like Churchill is like racist or so, yeah, you could probably find that out there. This is maybe a little different. I think even if you really like Churchill, you should probably read this book, and just check it out. And this one as well is just I kind of had more fun when I got to this. Although this might be, some people might be more captivated by this, where it's more how he's getting into office with all the stuff, and there's kind of interesting drama with like Joe Kennedy and all this, everything going on in Britain. This is kind of where he's really at the forefront. Church, and this is where he's starting to fade, and you see where the tide kind of turns on the British Empire with Churchill. Okay, so those are out of the way. And then so we've got a few more. Okay, we'll do Joseph Goebbels, mastermind of the Third Reich, and this is a complete biography, maybe more so than than most of his book, because he never really did say like Hitler entirely or Himmler entirely, for like he does Himmler's life story before World War II and Hitler only during World War II and things. But this is, I'd say, it's somewhat definitive. This is really probably, if you're going to read a book on Joseph Goebbels, you're going to want to read probably this book, and or like a biography. There are there's a lot of people who really are huge into this book and will say it's his best and things. I don't necessarily agree. This is a book that like a lot of these books I'll buy, like like these books I'll get signed because they I would usually buy his books when I would see him because he'd be selling his books, and then so why not just buy it from the man in person? He signs it, he'll talk to you about it, and I've, say what you will, I don't really know any other historians. Like I've never you know Irving is kind of like Irving. I've emailed with, I've talked on the phone with, and you know when I change address, he email me and tell me that his letters weren't reaching me and things. I can't say I've had that kind of experience with like Anthony Bever or something like that. But Irving, I don't know. So, but this book in particular, and this book, I'd known him for a while before I ordered this from his website, and but he signs the book, and um, actually he sent me 2 copies of this book. I don't know why, if it was an accident or on purpose. I didn't clarify on that. I just figured he was sending me 2 books because he likes me. But the other one, yeah, made a good gift. But it is a cool book. I think it does look good on your shelf. One of my favorite things about it is without the design of it. Most of Irving's books are blue without the dust jacket, and I think it's kind of dope that this one's brown, and that's that's all. It's just, I thought that was a good call for this book. It seems appropriate, and it really is just I mean these are impressive looking books, and they look really good on your shelf, and they're just maybe something a little different. Than the paper is really nice, and the layouts are cool. I think he did a really great job with these, and it may just be a little different, for your bookshelf. If whatever you've got on it, they're probably gonna look, But I'll say a few things in this book. I read this book because I thought I would really get into the inner workings of the Goebbels propaganda, and how he did all this, and how his ministry conducted business, and I figured it would show more about how their creative process with the Third Reich's propaganda, and how they're making the stuff. And I thought it was going to be would deep dive more into that, and it that might be actually beyond the scope of this book. And this book is it's fairly long. Like I think it's like 500. It's like 500 pages, but you keep in mind that these pages seem I mean, the print is much smaller on these than, say, True Himmler. And this took me a lot longer to read than True Himmler did, this book. So even though they're both like 500 pages, the print in most of these books are much smaller. And so this takes you a while, and this goes into a lot. A lot of this is just a lot of this goes into like the philandering and things like that, and stuff that like his kind of love life, and he's always cheating on his wife, and kind of it's really not a flattering portrait of Goebbels. It's very much it's not like it's not like he's trying to destroy Goebbels. Is maybe a little more flattering than the Churchill, but he's definitely bringing the dirt on Goebbels. And this could just speak to Irving. Irving is just laying down the facts. He gets a lot of dirt on Joseph Goebbels, where he's really not leading that clean of a life, and can be kind of a tricky character, and was kind of a plotter in that some of these Nazis and their ministries and things would argue amongst each other. Before they took power, there's major spats among themselves, and you see how he kind of changes positions and loyalties and things, and is kind of a snaky character in some ways. But it's not like it's also like somewhat sympathetic, and he's not saying like this is a bad guy necessarily, but he definitely isn't saying like this is a saintly type guy, because this is just it's kind of a straightforward life story from beginning to end, and it's very informative. Some of it I do think like I'll say I think if you maybe I had some kind of I don't know, misgivings about some of the stuff like with the Goebbels diaries. I think Irving he seems to master it, but I think you could link up different things where Goebbels says and it's not that Irving doesn't mention the stuff like that. It seems clear Goebbels knows about Jews being killed, say in the Reinhard camps that I mentioned, and like I say, Irving, like because this is where these remarks are made. Say after Pearl Harbor, after the Wannsee Conference, and it's early 1942, where you're opening up Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, and Goebbels refers to this stuff in his diary and talks about this stuff. And I would say that this if you really come up with some sources and start putting dates together, I think you start seeing that Goebbels is talking to Hitler about what's going on with these not in these camps, because these camps aren't these ones that, like, and Irving himself, he says that these are just straight up extermination camps. You don't show up to Belzec and you don't work in like for IG Farben or something. You just get killed like within like pretty much upon arrival. And Goebbels refers to the stuff in his diary. He talks about it, but I think the accounts of the stuff, I would say it's almost purposeful distortion on Irving's part. So this is I think Irving's trying to build a case where Hitler doesn't know about this stuff. I think if you really come down to it, I'm just gonna say I think maybe he was distorting the truth. Maybe unknowingly, maybe just carried about on what he sees as his mission to like vindicate German dictator, to but I think if you really look at it, the way that Irving writes about it is not that he like lies about the stuff. He gives what he says, but he doesn't necessarily connect all the dots that he can at the time he can, and I think that gives it seems like he maybe doesn't want to go into it. It seems like he would know better than he tells you. Maybe you disagree, but but I mean, read the book and tell me. So like I say, people hit me up about this stuff. Like, they'll try to tell me that I'm dumb, and that I'm dumb because like I believe the regime propaganda. I believe the establishment media about this. But like, actually, I've I've pretty much read all this stuff. I read from historians on both sides. I get, I try to get the issue down. Like, I, I'm not particularly loyal to anything that someone tells me. I know a lot of friends who believe crazy stuff, and but I'm not saying that I don't know. Like, I'll just say that it's just my opinion. I've read all these books. I don't have to take David Irving's word for it. I've read all his books. I consider myself a fan, and but I don't endorse everything he says. Some of what Irving says, I think, is wrong. Some of what Irving says, I think other historians have got better. Maybe you're a huge Irving partisan, and that'll make you mad or something. But maybe you should just grow up. I'm not trying to. I don't agree with everything that happened to Irving. Like, I went to these events where he's getting harassed by just these Antifa shitheads and things like that. This is long before you probably have heard of this stuff. Long before you probably heard of Antifa or even Hitler or Joseph Goebbels or anything. But people will still get mad at me, like, because I don't agree with their opinion. Well, I'm just telling you, like, I read all these books and I just go with, I make up my own opinion. So, personally, I think, it's pretty, I think I'd say it's pretty clear that Hitler did hate Jews and kill Jews have them killed at his order, and Irving brings stuff like that up in this book. Magda Goebbels says that she was at before they even took power, she's at like a cafe with Hitler because she really had a thing for Hitler, and probably married Goebbels just for that alone. But she said that Hitler saw a Jewish kid and said he could squash that kid like a bug, and that's what he'd like to do, and it wouldn't, he wouldn't feel really anything about it. There's not a direct quote, but he says something like that, and Irving writes about this. It is in the book. If you think that Hitler just loved Jews and would never kill a fly, maybe you're just, I don't I don't know what to tell you. You can believe that all you want, and I won't be that mad at you. But I do think you're kind of stupid, and maybe you could read a little more books before you try raging at me and telling me how I need to subscribe to Ernst Zundel or some. I'll say that too, and that was another mistake on Irving. He probably should have never got involved with Ernst Zundel. But what can you do? He said that himself, actually. And I've talked to him, and he doesn't really endorse that kind of thing. He doesn't think that stuff is serious, but he did get involved in that, because just from his situation, you just get involved with maybe people you maybe wouldn't have been comfortable with otherwise, but now here you are, or you're trying to do the right thing. Everybody makes mistakes. Irving certainly did, but I'm not trying to I don't know, maybe I'm getting defensive about this, but some people are just they get kind of hardcore into the stuff, or they think that um, there's only one historian out there, and his name is David Irving. You know, and all of his books are like the Word of God or something. It's really not the case. These books are really interesting and filled with facts, and Irving is, I think, a really good writer. Like, I like the way he writes, and I think he can be funny and like really entertaining, and he can just paint pictures of things at times, and he knows when to kind of delve into things and when to get maybe just have a broader perspective, and it these make very fun reads. All of David Irving's books, I pretty much plow right through, except maybe this one, which, because I just had times where it's just it's more about Goebbels plowing all the actresses and things. Like it doesn't so much show like how his machinery works. It goes over, it a little bit. It shows how he liked to work maybe, and some of the stuff they were doing, and it goes over his big speeches. It does go over some of the stuff, but it's more drama than say like techniques and things, which I think would have been you know kind of a cool book. But either way, like that probably would have been like a cool book, like just like the Goebbels propaganda ministry, like just a book about that. I think maybe, I don't know. This is a neat book. It's an interesting life story. Just, I mean, this guy died like, you know, I mean, like a really kind of epic death, but I mean, just terrible stuff. Kills all his kids and himself in Berlin, and it's kind of a crazy tale. Recommended for sure, but I'll say it took me longer. There were times where I did get kind of bored with it, because I don't, I'm not that into this guy hooking up with actresses or or whatever. Um, what else? Okay, since I kind of got, maybe we're kind of bleeding into this already, but we'll go into Hitler's War, which I've already talked about on the channel because we talked about Hitler biographies. But I mean, this is a really good book, and is most valuable. So just showing what it's like in these headquarters and bunkers and things, and Hitler, just how Hitler carried out the war, and it gives a different. It's kind of it's very much just follows Hitler throughout the stuff. Maybe gives background on how he makes his decisions, but it's talking about where he's going and doing all these kind of things. It brings up maybe I think he could have went into some of the more like the drugs he was doing and things like methamphetamine. He does bring up the stuff like Morel, his doctor, but you would think it could be brought up a little more. I don't know, but it's already a huge book. So what am I saying? Like, it's this book, the pages are very thin and almost see-through, and this comes up to. I mean, I'm not trying to count like indexes. So what? Over 800 pages. So this is a longer book. It's actually two books combined, because it gives the run up to the war, but that's a shorter little journey. Yeah, I mean, this book used to be a big West Point study, just because it shows kind of how maybe it shows like command. it shows how to run a command center, or like how so it gives you because this is a leader. You have a Führer who's very much involved in the war and how it's going, and so he shows all that. So this was considered valuable for West Pointers for something like decades before it became a little too controversial. And this book has changed a little bit. I think it does have kind of, it's not really said, but it's just kind of unsaid. It doesn't really go over, it doesn't show you Hitler commanding the Holocaust or something. It kind of leaves that out. It's for what it's worth. It's not going to really get into that so much. And so it's kind of, whatever by omission that so offends people, because this is already a huge book. So people might get pissed because Hitler's not commanding the Holocaust in this book, but he's commanding already World War II and all this stuff, and it's really entertaining, and it's just filled with you could see in all these books, every Irving book, like it's this big thing that he's only going to write the facts, and that's why it's real history, unlike conformist historians. He says, what is real history? It is history that travels straight from history maker to document and from the archives to the writer in this book without political input and free of academic prejudice. It is history that cannot be bought and cannot be bought off. I mean, it sounds dope. I think he lays it on a little thick, and maybe isn't necessarily how the stuff has to go. But I mean, it's appreciated where you see the primary sources. So if you have a problem with it, he gives you his sources. All of Irving's books have huge notes and sources at the end and indexes and all the stuff that makes his books really valuable and kind of just really nice publications, even if you don't agree with the stuff. I don't really like I said, I don't agree with all of his takes. But I would recommend this book for sure. It's really entertaining. It's really insightful. It's well written. It's a straightforward military historian. It's just military history. So people can get pissed off about that. But if you like just information and facts, you shouldn't be too scared of this book. Okay. Next, the last battle. So Nuremberg, the last battle. So you see the prosecutor here, Jackson, and this is kind of the main character of the book, who Irving is sympathetic to, but in the end, obviously, he's going over that this isn't like a real trial in his view, and it's not necessarily justice served, and that there's huge problems with it, with how it all went, and I don't know. I have to say, like, I think that this one isn't too incendiary. You might figure the idea of that, saying that the Nuremberg trials are kind of baloney, is like a really controversial thing to say, but I don't necessarily see how you'd figure that, because I think in any, even if you're not that familiar with Nuremberg, you can kind of see the problems with the whole setup. But he's getting into all the nitty gritty with it, kind of the weird stuff. Some of it is just they just didn't have all the facts yet at the time. It's just plainly true. But they're running this trial, and it's maybe different than is presented later. I think that's one of the more valuable things to the book, is that it just shows the trial as like a real thing. It is trying to bring up the flaws in it, but it's going to be helpful if you're not interested in like getting a more emotional, melodramatic puff piece that is doing whatever for you. He's just kind of showing like this is how they decided to do the trials, and how information came in, and what people were really tried for, which it might be different than what you are than what you think. I think just about everybody would be somewhat surprised, or at least illuminated with. And I find it hard to believe that all this stuff is Irving got all the facts wrong. For the most part, you can just look at the sources and you see it's other historians say the same thing. Like I said before, his books aren't that different than other more mainstream books, like even books by like Jewish historians about the Holocaust. Irving goes over the same stuff, maybe with his own perspective. But I think in that it is helpful to read people other than Irving too. There are things where you're going to get blind spots, I think, if you only read Irving, and you'll get a little lopsided in your understanding of the stuff. Figure Irving is somewhat, he's a historian, but he's somewhat of an artist as well, in that he's making a product. He wants handsome books. He wants he's making certain points for whatever reason. And I don't know. I think that this book is interesting. I don't. There's nothing in it I don't see that would. It doesn't like necessarily like lay out any kind of case. Like there's no. It's not that revisionist even. It kind of details the trial and the problems with it, how they didn't have what facts they had all the time, how people might have been charged and hanged for things that they're different than you might see now. There are all kinds of things that they cared about a lot more at the time. Like you'll point out that they were a lot more interested not in say allied prisoners who were executed, who'd surrendered and were executed, or like they're like Brits who escape and are executed. These things kind of were a little more prominent than like Jewish people. But this is brought up as well, but it's not necessarily what you're thinking. The way that the trial is presented, I think you'll get a lot of good facts from this. I don't necessarily think you should go read another Nuremberg book as well. You're probably somewhat familiar with Nuremberg. This maybe can show you a different perspective on it, maybe show you some flaws in it. Maybe you don't take everything straight to the bank, but you might find it to be an interesting book. I know I've said that, I keep on saying this stuff over and over, that this stuff is interesting, but what else? What you either have interest or you don't. If you're watching this, you're probably interested in World War II, and you'd like to. Maybe you're a fan of Irving. Maybe you agree with what I say, or not. maybe you have your own favorites, and I missed. I didn't go over like the Goering biography or something. What can you do? I don't got all the books here. Anyhow, yeah, that was fun. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't plan to make this video at all, but I heard the news and I started kind of going over conversations I've had with him in time, the times I've seen him. I've ate dinner with him, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I figured maybe if I see a lot of people are saying they want to support him at this time. So maybe this will inform you a bit on how you can go about doing that. Maybe some of these books. I mean, I would probably say if I'm going to give like a recommendation or like a buyer's guide or something, I'd probably say to not get True Himmler unless you're a completist or it just particularly you want a weird book. If you think it is you want like a definitive biography of Himmler and that's what you're trying to get, you're not really going to get it with the book. You'll get a lot of facts and things like that, and maybe you'll be happy with it. You probably will be. You're probably going to think whatever, but I just don't. I thought the book was kind of disappointing, strange in some good ways, but in other ways not. But I'd recommend just about anything else. Definitely of these books that I brought up. These are all really good. If you're if you've never read Irving's books before, you might want to start with one of these, or maybe if you just want to read about Churchill, obviously, and then or if those don't seem that interesting or just too familiar, the Goebbels book, maybe don't let me it's not like there's all these like sex scenes or something, but it's a little tawdry, and you'll probably like it. You'll probably think it's good. Most people, I think it's good. I do too. But yeah. So, I don't know. Very sad news. But yeah, maybe this will, if you're a fan or if you're interested, you can check it out. But I don't know. I'll try not to go so long without making a video. I plan to make another one very shortly. Like I say, I plan to do this one on this book. I won't go into it right now, just because I still want to make that video. But okay. Thank you for tuning in.